So this message is being recorded. For those of you just joining us, my name is Terry Redding. I'm with the Washington Association of Professional Anthropologists. Welcome. Let me first talk about DOGE, the name Surviving DOGE. This session really covers everything. It's not just DOGE, but it's people who have lost funding, who have lost their agency, who have lost their job, who had to retire early, who had to shift over, consultants, full-time staff, faculty. A lot of folks were touched in a lot of different ways, but DOGE is sort of a shorthand. I mean, all that stuff could not fit easily in a title. So just bear with me on that. But what we're talking about is really the big picture. Let me see if I can get to the next slide. So the purpose really of what we're doing here is to really explore how we survive the next several years in terms of jobs and meaningful careers. It's a lot less about not discussing what an abomination all this is. We know that is. It's also not really about the organization and pushback and how do we resist, which is a very worthy topic. Certainly that will be covered at SFAA and other meetings, but really tonight the focus is going to be on how we move ahead in terms of our persons doing careers and getting jobs and paying bills and all that sort of fun stuff. We've got some great speakers here. They all have a little bit of a different twist on their experiences and how they've moved on. A reminder, the session is being recorded again, so just for those of you just joining. Georgia Hartman, Sarah Love, and Anahid Matosian will go in order, about 10 minutes each. We're really fortunate to have Elizabeth Bridey with us. Elizabeth doesn't like it when I sing her praises, but she probably knows more about anthropology careers than anybody else. She's done a lot of work for many years on careers. So thank you, Elizabeth, for being here and helping out with the session as our discussant. So again, the overview, just these first 15 minutes, that's me yammering here very quickly. Then we'll have about a half hour for our three speakers to introduce themselves. In turn, they will turn on their cameras and speakers and go from there. Hopefully each one about 10 minutes on three topics: their past jobs, what they were doing, what steps they took after these cuts to move themselves forward, and what they're doing now, how they're applying anthropology, and what they see their career arc being over the next few years. Hopefully around 10 minutes each. Then Elizabeth will come on about 15 minutes. Now this session officially ends at 8:30. We do have the Zoom going to 9 in case we do have a particularly robust discussion. If anybody wants to hang around till 9, if you're not tired out, we will do that. But our panelists all have agreed to stay until 8:30. So if they're at their leisure to stick around if they want to or not. Please mute and turn off your cameras. If you have questions, comments, things you want to say, please put them into the chat, okay? There's a lot of people here. We got a very short amount of time, so I know everybody has a lot to say, but please just put that in the chat, and then when we get to our discussion period, we will revisit your comments and go from there. So thanks for your participation. Again, our recording of this will be posted in due course via the WAPA website, probably on the WAPA YouTube channel. So I am going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn on my video, so be prepared. Here I am. So my name is Terry Redding. Like I said, I worked on a USAID funded maternal and child health project, mostly in Africa. And the USAID was kind of the first to get DOGED. I mean, in 2 or 3 days into the new administration, we got a stop work order. And by February, the end of February, I was fired. I just turned 65, which I can't believe when I say that, but it still hurts to say. Most of my peers that I've talked to aren't going to go back into full-time work. So that's not going to be the focus of our discussion today. Most people in my age group are doing part-time work, consulting, whatever we can cobble together out of the remains of what is left of international development. So let me turn now to Georgia Hartman, our first speaker. She's going to talk about what she's been doing. Uh, and thank you, Georgia, and take it away.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it on time. It's a big ask to talk about it all in 10 minutes. So bear with me. It's nice to be here today. Thank you for the invitation, WAPA. As Terry said, my name is Georgia Hartman. I until let's see, depends on when you define it, February or July of this year, I was working at USAID as a like basically a gender and climate change advisor. So I knew this was coming for me, or my office knew this was coming for us, both from sort of a gender angle and a climate angle. Though of course nobody quite saw this what did indeed come our way. But the reason I mention that is to say that I think I was like a bit prepared for some sort of earth-shattering things, though I was very, very optimistic of what might happen. But I was able to sort of shift my view. So some steps I took forward, or I took after DOGE to move forward, and just noting I took some notes here. So if I'm looking over to my screen, it's because I'm looking at that. I was honestly most worried about my like mental health and resilience to weather everything that was coming. My husband had spent several years previously underemployed, and I saw how hard that was on him. And I knew that it might be a long road, and so I really wanted to prepare myself and build that kind of like resilience. And so some of the things that I did were give myself time to really process what everything that happened that was, frankly, I think we can all of us who went through it can say it was really traumatic, let alone that, losing one's job is recognized as a traumatic life event. I think this was a really quite exceptional way to lose one's job, one's career. Um, and I think I also really looked at it, and I encourage everyone to think of it in some ways. I mean, it sounds awful to say I would never want this to happen again, but can be an opportunity, right? An opportunity to reflect and honestly, like relax a little bit. I know that I don't mean that to sound too like flip, but we were working, like I was certainly working a very demanding job, and I was very stressed out all of the time. And so, I did enjoy being able to just kind of process and detach from that a little bit. And I think I really benefited a lot from that. So, with all that in mind, some things that really benefited me was one of the first things I did within just a couple of weeks was get together a kind of a group, like a friend group, really modeled after my dissertation writing group, which was something that supported me so much throughout grad school, became my dissertation writing group, became my job document support writing group, it became my oh my gosh, how do we leave the academy support group. And so I really locked that in place, and we set up weekly calls and did some exercises together, but also just had that like touch point week after week. And that was so helpful to just be able to commiserate and share what we were going through, and also share different things we were learning about the job market or not with each other in a really nice, non-judgmental space. And I'll say, I think the theme for me above all to weathering the storm, like has everything to do with community in all these different ways that community expresses itself for me. So one was this group. Another something that I benefited from a lot was coaching. Have a really amazing coach who actually happens to be my former boss. I've worked with several coaches, but she really stands out and is amazing. And some of the things that she did also involved hosting like retreats for people, like federal workers who were impacted. And it was incredibly helpful. And part of why I mention this is not just about how helpful the coaching was, but also one of the exercises that we did in preparation for for the workshop was was to reflect on another time in your life when you went through something hard and what sort of allowed you to be resilient through that. And that writing exercise was really incredibly helpful to me, like really eye-opening. And I reflected on when I was writing my dissertation, and I remember I was like doing this really hardcore like yoga class, and it was really powerful for me to be pushing myself to the limits of what I thought I could do intellectually and physically at the same time. And I just knew as I went through this period, I wanted to be strong. And so I joined my local gym that I'd been thinking about for years and started going to classes and even built a little, gym community too with all my really cute former federal workers. Gym mates. And yeah, and a lot of it also just helped me reflect on, what motivates me just day to day, and what motivates me, what do I want to do next in my life? Like, what did I like about my old job? What didn't I like about my old job? And what kinds of things do I want to lean into? And so, for me, um, I spent a lot of time actually thinking about like what my dream job was, and I felt a lot of a lot of pressure. I actually found that like very paralyzing, doing all these visualizations of like picture yourself in 5 years and where are you? What do you want to do? And I remember I could like picture everything in my house, but I could like when it came to like, and then you go to work, what does that look like? And I like just blank. And it was really helpful for me that once I kind of like let go of that, um, because of side note, another thing that I did, which was a huge opportunity, which I would have never gotten to do when I was working my incredibly demanding job at USAID, was I went to Italy for 2.5 weeks and did an intensive Italian language course, which I've always wanted to do. And it was so good to get out and focus on something completely different and do something that was really for myself and my own personal growth like that. And that space allowed me to kind of get out of that mind space of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What's my dream job? And I just kind of, when I got back, kind of landed on, okay, I don't know what my dream job is. But I know that there's, all these jobs and partnerships and fundraising. Partnerships is a huge part of what I did at USAID, working with multinational corporations. I love working, trying to find like a shared value proposition. And I was like, okay, I'm going to lean into this. Like, maybe it'll be awful. Like, maybe I'll love it, but it's good for me for right now. And that really helped me kind of refocus. Yeah, just kind of freed me of some of the weight that comes with like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my dream job? And so on to the third question, what am I doing now and how am I applying my anthropological skills? Well, as luck would have it, things worked out differently than I had thought, which is, I'd been fully pivoting into like fundraising for higher ed. I was looking at kind of returning to academic admin in that capacity. And a job that I had applied for came through actually with a former partner that I'd worked with at USAID, IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And so I took that job and I've been in it since October. And it's really great. I'm managing a project that I used to manage as the donor at USAID, and I'm learning so much about being on the implementing side. And yeah, it's a really great position. I feel really fortunate. As far as let's see, as far as where I might go in the future, the next several years, frankly, I feel very freed of it feels very freeing to not worry about that right now. For right now, feel good about knowing where I am and where I want to go. I don't know, like I don't know how many years in the future, but I'm just kind of trucking forward. This whole experience has also been so incredibly jarring to me. I feel so deeply, personally, and profoundly aware of precariousness, and that everything can be completely taken away from me at any minute. And frankly, I mean, it feels like very embodied. And so it's good for me, maybe not to, feels freeing not to worry about that. And then as far as the question of how am I applying my anthropological skills, I would say that much like what I did at USAID, I think fundamentally some of the things that some of the ways in which I use my anthropological skills are really thinking about people. I mean, that sounds so obvious, but I work with a lot of like ecologists and biologists and like very science-minded people who are thinking about like plants and water or animals, whatever they're thinking about. And I find that I'm often really coming in and saying, okay, like this is great, love this project design. But like ultimately it's going to be people who are implementing the project. So let's think about people as like full social human beings. And, what do we need to do? Like, how can we design the program such that like it really engages them in a way that you are going to get your environmental results that you seek in this project. So that's it to me. I'll hand it over to the next speaker. I think it's Sarah.
Thank you so much. That was so inspiring to hear. Just being able to hear from people who have gone through similar situations that are equally heartbreaking, but have ended up being, as Georgia mentioned, freeing and positive overall. So to give you a little bit of a background on me and what I was doing, my name is Sarah Love. I'm a professional archaeologist and a historic preservation specialist. And so I was working with the General Services Administration as a historic preservation and fine arts specialist when the public building service was very suddenly and very brutally under attack very early on. This happened to us, I think, March 3rd. We were told that our unit was being abolished and all of the positions within it were being liquidated. This is the language that they used. It was very harsh. And I had been a public servant, not necessarily with the federal government, but also with the state of Georgia for a very long time. And I've always felt a call towards public service and to helping people at no cost, right? And so through both my experiences with the state of Georgia and with the federal government, I had a very public facing role where I answered a lot of public questions about cultural resources, where I lent my time and just gave my time to causes that I believed in. And I was able to do that under the role that I was given in both governments. And one of the things that just really surprised me was that after almost a decade of networking and meeting people and showing up for other people, I did not have to do much to find my next step because my network found me. And that was something that was so unbelievably moving, was to see people coming to me. And I did have to go through and apply for a number of jobs just because I was really terrified. I had no idea. My family is not independently wealthy. I didn't have any generational wealth to fall back on, and I'm the primary earner in both my marriage and also, in consideration to taking care of my aging mother. And it was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure to think, okay, well, how not only am I losing a job that I was extremely passionate about and that I loved very much, but how am I going to support my family? And so as I was applying for things, a gentleman who had been kind of pestering me, he gave me almost like a biannual nudge to come work for the company that he was working for. And as a public servant, I had always, especially like in cultural resource management. And if you're not familiar with cultural resource management, what that is, it is the protection and conservation and documentation of archaeological sites, historic sites, cultural landscapes, and things of that nature. And I had always kind of regarded private sector cultural resource management to be profit driven. And in my head, that read as a little bit cold and calculating. And I didn't want to be part of that. You know, I really, really bought into this public service ethos, and it meant a lot to me. And my identity was really, really wrapped up in that quite a lot. And so to lose that, you know, I'm sure that everybody here that lost their position went through something very similar. It's you're not just losing a job, you're losing part of your identity, and that can hurt so much. And so to wake up and find that people were reaching out to me. So my friend had been kind of asking me for a few years to come join his company. I was very resistant to it. And then as I was applying for any job that I could find in both historic preservation or archaeology, because I have a dual background, and I was able to very fortunately like apply for a different number of jobs based on my experience. He messaged me again. He had no idea what had happened because I was very private about it. I didn't really feel like telling the world. I had a couple colleagues that posted about their experience on LinkedIn almost immediately, but I kept it very close to my chest because I was almost in denial for a very long time. So he came knocking again, and he messaged and he said, hey, you know, we're hiring for a senior archaeologist at this mid-sized engineering firm called VHB. And I said, well, wouldn't you know it? This is the time that I really needed that nudge to give your company another chance. I got a couple other job offers in that time. And when I went and I looked at the company blogs and the projects that they worked with, I just found that the company that I chose was really committed to sustainability and urban planning, and focused on alternative modes of transportation, walkability, and healthy communities. And, you know, I think when you're an archaeologist and you really value the role that heritage plays in shaping society, you don't necessarily want to put yourself in a situation where you are doing archaeological compliance work for projects that you don't agree with or that you don't believe in. And so there could have been this opportunity to go and do this work for, you know, new border facilities or military installations. And I just really didn't want to be in a role like that. And so finding a firm whose mission and ethics kind of aligned with mine, I think was really great. And I have been able to dispel a lot of the preconceived notions that I had about how private industry functions. So that's what I'm doing now. And as far as how I am applying my anthropological skills, I would say that one of the reasons that you see me in this hotel room is because I had a project come up very suddenly from an old contact of mine. One of my favorite sites to get to work on is early 20th century African American sites. You know, I live here in Georgia. I'm a Georgia native. And it goes without saying that Georgia's economy and Georgia's heritage would not be what it was if it were not for the embodied labor of enslaved and trafficked African people. And I really love doing the work that I do in service of sites that help tell that history and preserve that heritage, because those are kind of some of the stories that don't necessarily make it into the history books, right? When you have a group of people that have been systematically kept from reading and writing and documenting their own history, the way that we can tell that history is through buildings, it's through historic sites, it's through archaeological sites. And so a contact that I had worked with about 10 years ago while I was still a public servant for the state of Georgia contacted me, and the National Park Service was administering a very large grant to a very beautiful vernacular church out here that was built by the local African American community. And to administer that grant, the National Park Service wanted a lot of the dirt under the building to be screened. And so I find that taking off the public service hat wasn't really necessary because I still have found ways to do the projects that I really believe in and work for a company that believes in the same types of projects. And I have just found, I think Georgia articulated this really beautifully, is there's a certain freedom that comes along with this and not having to have a perfect picture of what your future looks like. And now I am finding that things that I did not realize had the capacity to make me happy make me really happy. I was over the moon ecstatic. I would say that in a year of very low lows, being contacted to work on a project that excited me and to know that that contract was sought because of my relationship and the work that I had done in the past left a lasting impression on people. It made me feel really good. And it's for the National Park Service. It's money that is coming out of the Historic Preservation Fund, which is a public funding mechanism that's approved by Congress. And so I don't have to be employed as a public servant to still be a public servant. And finding that out and finding projects that make me happy have been really freeing. And I also have set aside some time to chase a pipe dream that I've had for a really long time and creating a YouTube channel dedicated to explaining to people in an accessible and interesting and educational way the way that heritage shapes the society that we live in. Because a lot of people consider that archaeology is a time period, but it's really a way about looking at the world and the ideas that we have of people and the value that we have on certain groups. I mean, so much of the rhetoric that we hear on a daily basis is rooted in historic prejudices. And we have to consider the way that heritage shapes not just the past, but the day-to-day that we live in and the future that we're trying to build for people. And it gives me an opportunity to work with my husband as well, because he's really interested in editing and working with like Adobe Premiere and things like that. And of course, like he's a gadget nerd. And so he likes playing with cameras. And my husband is not an anthropologist. He's not an archaeologist. He's not in historic preservation. At a professional level, he doesn't do anything that I do. And so we've never had the opportunity to work together. And working for the government, I was always a little bit scared to use my voice in certain ways for fear that it would be reflective of the opinions of an institution or an agency. And so now without that, I'm able to really explore my own voice and my own opinions and put them out there while getting to work with my favorite person in the world. And so what felt devastating, I know that I'm putting a really nice sheen on this because it's worked out well for me and I have found new ways to be happy. But the months leading up to this were dark. They were difficult and they were soul crushing. And I'm so glad that I surrounded myself with people like Elizabeth, who's on the call, who kept reminding me in some of my darkest moments that it will be okay, that people survive things like this, and that grief is a process. And I'm just really happy now because, you can take away somebody's job that pays them, but you cannot make somebody not an anthropologist once you've decided that you're an anthropologist. And so I hope that, if any of you ever deal with difficulties like this in the future, that you are able to look at the people who have gone through this and see that we came out on the other side of it. And with that, I will pass it off to Anahid.
Thanks, Sarah. Can you let me see if people can see. Okay, hi. Can folks see me and hear me? I just wanted to say I really appreciate being invited to this roundtable and or this panel, and I really also appreciate the vulnerability that everyone's showing in terms of just what they've experienced as well. And what I would say for my situation is that it's a little bit different track. I was working for the Pentagon as a cultural anthropologist, which that was honestly my a dream job, and I never thought my dream job would be at the Pentagon, but it was. My background was working with Syrian refugee women. I'm Armenian American myself, so I grew up hearing family stories at the dinner table of my grandfather surviving the Armenian genocide, other relatives speaking about their experiences during the Lebanese Civil War and the Syrian conflict. So I was constantly exposed to stories of family members who survived really awful things, but had just the best, most brightest personalities you'd ever meet. So that's how I was kind of hooked on working with Syrian refugees in the first place, and that work kind of morphed. Like it's a long story, but I was given the opportunity to work for the Marine Corps as a contractor in 2014 before I started my PhD. And back then I was working on a pre-deployment cultural awareness training it was during the quote unquote hearts and minds era of the war. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that because a lot of anthropologists were employed. We don't have to get into that. That's not the point of this, but I was involved in that as well. So that was my first intro into federal service on the contracting side. And after my PhD, after I worked with Syrian refugees in Armenia, I came back to the States and I did the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, which I think a lot of you are familiar with as well, since this is with WAPA. And I was able to work at the State Department for the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, another bureau I never thought I would ever have experience working for, but it's somehow, I don't know, jobs just keep turning out like that for me. People I never thought I would work with end up being really great advocates, and we were able to find common ground. So I worked on atrocity prevention for the atrocity prevention policy, where my job was to go around the world and talk about the role of police or law enforcement professionals in preventing and also, their role in participating in mass atrocities. I mean, I'm not trying to say we want you to participate in mass atrocities, but just spreading awareness, especially to embassy staff and talking about the roles that or like warning signs in your communities of more violence to come. So all this to say, the last position I had, which I thought was going to be a permanent one, and I was really excited about it, was working as a cultural anthropologist for the Pentagon for the newly created in a couple years ago Civilian Protection Center of Excellence. So with full transparency, my program has not been DOGed. I think it's on the chopping block through talking to former coworkers, but I took the deferred resignation program, but which to me did not feel voluntary in the least, especially since I'll disclose that I was 9 months pregnant at the time with my first child, and I am a single parent, which was again not the plan for the past year, but it's just my reality. And so it happened at a time where I was new to motherhood, and it was honestly completely traumatic, and I'm still processing that now. So I'll make this a little bit faster. What I was doing beforehand, while I was pregnant, is working for the Army. The Army wanted me to become a red team analyst, which a lot of people might not be familiar with, but it's about the point of it is to helping senior leaders make better decisions or improve decision making, challenge assumptions or biases that you have. For example, about the enemy, we want to reduce the harm that civilians face during conflict. This was really important to me due to my own personal family history and my work professionally as an anthropologist. So I was honestly really honored that I got to play a role in that. And I was looking through papers the other day. My plan post maternity leave was to work on going through civilian harm cases. And there's a huge backlog that have not been paid out. And I was going to take the lead on going through that and seeing this is how assumptions were made. And I was given this opportunity to do this, to get this certification that not a lot of military members got as well. And I don't have military experience, so it was an immense privilege to be able to go to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas for 8 weeks while I was 8.5 months pregnant. But I did that, and it was a few months later, it just came to the point where the rubber hit the road, where there was really no guarantee that my position would be safe moving forward. And I had zero family in DC. It just became impossible for me to justify staying there and having a child and working. So I couldn't do that. I had to take the deferred resignation program. So to be transparent, my program was not DOGed, but I would consider myself definitely impacted by the new administration's policies. So I want to be clear about that. But at the same time that I was forced to this position, I finished my red team training. I even got my top secret clearance right around the same time I was forced to take the deferred resignation program. And so I wanted to utilize these brand new skill sets I got on the other side. So long story short, I moved to Michigan, which is where my family was from and where I am right now. I'm really fortunate to have a lot of family support in terms of just helping me out with health insurance and my son, as well as just helping me recover and get my feet under me, which I'm still trying to do to this day. And immediately I went to postpartum therapy. Someone else mentioned coaching with the former boss, and actually one of my Marine Corps bosses reached out to me. She was the provost there, and she's been, I mean, we had like very marginal contact when I was working under her at the time, but now she's just like really madly in my corner, and I just cannot sing her praises enough. So coaching has been helpful, as well as for me, just with chronic overwhelm with job hunting and single parenting. ChatGPT has been helpful for me in terms of prioritization, in terms of like what can I do in terms of networking or prioritizing job applications. And also, I was really fortunate. Thank you to Elizabeth Briody for introducing me to a company called Relations Research, where I signed a 1-year contract to do. I'm doing part-time consulting work, and maybe it'll lead to full-time, but not quite sure at this point. But the mission of Relations Research is to uncover areas of misalignment between clients and like holding companies. For example, I'm working for a utility sector company right now, or consulting for them. So I'm just doing, again, a lot of interviews, a lot of coding and transcribing, sharing the results of those interviews. It is very formulaic. There's a very specific process and methodology that this company likes to use using durable frameworks, but it's exactly like all of it is anthropological, and they've hired anthropologists before, so that's really comforting to see that it's being used. Earlier in the summer, once I moved back to my home state, I did a lot of aggressive networking with the University of Michigan, which is my alma mater. I'm currently networking with the state of Michigan jobs. I interviewed for a city of Detroit job last week. I even thought about going into user experience design, but for me, it didn't feel like a good area of alignment. I know for a lot of people, maybe it would be a good fit, but for me, I think I'm more justice oriented. And it didn't seem like a good fit for me personally. So right now I'm still working at Relations Research, consulting part-time, still looking for full-time work. And now I'm thinking about using the red teaming skills that I did acquire through the military and applying that through risk management, or maybe even getting a certificate in enterprise risk management. So I'm networking with folks specializing in that for different companies right now, with the goal of opening my own consulting company down the road. And I'm also looking at the notes I took too. Yeah, so that's pretty much up to speed. Looking into translating the skills that I got working for the military, I thought it was a huge gift. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how traumatic it was in February when I was doing my red team training, when all this was happening, when DOGE was happening right and left. I didn't know if the next day would be my last, if I would have my job. Again, I was very pregnant, so it was it was a mess, which I think a lot of you can understand if you're pregnant or not. It's just a traumatic time. And I wanted to close by doing some reflection recently about what I liked about my job and bosses based on the experiences I have working with the company I'm working at right now, or like the people that I worked with before that I did assume that we would have nothing in common. For example, working with military folks or law enforcement folks. And then I realized that I was just putting a label on them without giving them an opportunity to show where we could align in some areas. So, but they ended up being my biggest advocates, those bosses. So, at the risk of going over time, just wanted to end that I have really been spending the bulk of my time just networking heavily, and that has led to some progress in terms of these are the positions that are available that you're not seeing online. It led me to the relations research consulting gig, and hopefully it will lead to another full-time job. But yeah, just wanted to close, but there is definitely a lot of grief that I am honestly still working through. So yeah, thank you for letting me share, and I'll turn it back over to Terry.
Thanks, Anahid. Thanks, everybody. Elizabeth, do you want to step in now?
Yes.
Thank you. Yep.
Well, thanks to the three presenters, terrific stories, very difficult to hear them. And I, at least from some of the comments in the chat, people certainly appreciated what you had to say. I'd like to go through each of the speakers' comments and then try to bring some clarity to some overlapping themes. So for Georgia, I was struck by her concept of models from the past, being able to uh, think of something that had happened previously in your life, in this case, that was fairly challenging, in some ways even traumatic, and understand for yourself that you survived it once, maybe you can survive it a second time. So when Georgia was laid off, she could at least look back and see that she had already built into herself some degree of resilience. Another point that Georgia made several times was the importance of reflection. And reflection is something I know that people will do in varying amounts. I think people tend to do it more often when they are distraught, trying to figure out what the heck just happened or what's going on. Uh, they will also do it when they're just kind of in a neutral state and let their mind wander. But in Georgia's case, she did it at a time when she was trying to process a traumatic event in her life, but at the same time had figured out strategies that were very positive for her, that enabled her to use the time she was exercising these strategies and reflect simultaneously. So she mentioned going to the gym, and she also mentioned going and taking the intensive language training in Italy. And both of those opportunities allowed her time to just think and process what had happened. And then the last thing I'll say from what I learned from Georgia was that she talked about how she ended up working in an area that was quite different from what she anticipated, but nonetheless, it was an area that was, I will say, kind of an allied area, or an area that was close to a neighbor kind of area to the one that she had been working with. And I think that that's worth thinking about, because it's a way to use some of the skills that you already have without having to completely absorb a brand new skill set. For Sarah, Sarah talked an awful lot about emotions. And I think that in American culture in particular, we don't talk about emotions enough. And I think when you go through something as traumatic as losing your job, you have these wildly different reactions, depending on the time and sometimes even depending on the hour of the day. I mean, she mentioned words going from heartbreaking to freeing, and going from a year of very low lows to a feeling of being over the moon. So there are these almost bimodal um, reactions that she experienced as she was, again, trying to process what had happened to her. Another aspect that she mentioned, which I thought was very valuable, was this ability to learn. She learned that, gosh, the private sector isn't all that bad necessarily, that you can do good work in the private sector, be proud of it, and be proud of the organization that you work for. And that this, in some ways, was kind of a revelation to her because she had always assumed that, having that publicly oriented mentality could only apply to people that were engaged in public service, working in some kind of governmental agency. But lo and behold, nope, she was wrong. And she learned that she was wrong. And now she's talking about it. So, two things that struck me about Sarah were both this notion of having to cope with wildly different emotions and learning a lot about yourself and how your own views change as they must change because you are now experiencing something that's very different. Anahid's story is also very much a personal story, given the fact that she was pregnant at the time she learned her area was going to be shuttered. Um, but one of the things that she talked about was this, and the others to a certain extent too, is that surviving these kinds of traumatic events is really a process, that it takes time. In her case, she had to and was lucky enough to be able to rely on her family to help her out with the new baby, and to get her moved from Washington back to their home. And thank goodness for that. And many of us hopefully would have a very similar kind of experience. But the process wasn't just about family. She also mentioned the importance of coaching, how one of her former bosses had really stepped up and been working with her. And she talked too about how she was continuously networking. And we know, at least from the research that we've done on job searches, that anthropologists typically get their jobs by networking. It's not necessarily by answering a job post, but it's really by understanding what is out there, who knows that you are looking, and how can the timing align so that you are best positioned for applying for and hopefully securing that position. Another thing that Anahid mentioned was the importance of the job hunt. But what came out in that discussion was her emphasis on values, that she values a justice-oriented way of life, and that's the kind of work that appeals most to her. So combined with this emphasis on people, on the connections that she had, and also that the others also had, Those values and those connections were critically important in her ability to manage thus far, and I think will put her in good stead for finding a more permanent solution to her job search. So what do I see that crosses all three speakers? I think that we're learning that when you suffer a trauma, a positive way of coping is to allow yourself to speak with others, take others into your confidence. It doesn't have to be a million people that you take into your confidence, but a few close friends, or a trusted family member or neighbor, someone who is interested in you and cares about you, that can be extremely important. If it all stays inside of you, then of course you know that may just be your own personality, and that may be the way you prefer to deal with things. But if you're able to express yourself verbally to a few trusted others, it seems that that is helpful. A second point that seemed to cross all the groups was, although it was explicitly mentioned more by Anahid, is the importance of values, that people know the kind of work in general that they would like to do. And in general, anthropologists are problem solvers, and they're people that want to make the world a better place. So in all of these cases, we're hearing that, yeah, you were doing one thing, and the work you were doing was extremely valuable. And all of us on this call, I think, would agree with that. But now you're now doing something that's kind of in an allied area from your original or from your past work with the federal government, but you're still hanging on to what is important to you, what matters to you, so that you can get up every morning and do the new work that you have taken on. And then a third point, I would say, which seems to have come up in with all of the people that presented, was the importance of reworking yourself, and doing so by asking others to help you, so that you are building your networks outward. Now, in Sarah's case, she didn't have to build out so much. People were coming to her, but nevertheless, there were times, I think, even in Sarah's case, where she didn't feel that there were that action was happening soon enough. So it's good, I think, to try to reach out as much as you possibly can, because who knows, something good may happen. And then the last point that crossed all three talks had to do with this concept of process, that when you lose your job, it is a process. It is something that takes time. When I lost my job at General Motors, so this was way back in '09, when GM and Chrysler both went through their bankruptcies, I noticed that I started losing weight, and I ended up losing about 10 pounds, which doesn't, it's not a huge amount, but it was noticeable. And a cousin of mine, when I was home back in Massachusetts visiting during the summertime, looked at me and he goes, "Wow," he said, "You've really lost weight." Without even thinking, I just flipped an answer and said, "Well, that's what losing a job will do to you." And he kind of was taken aback, but that's exactly how I responded to job loss. It was through my body and through these direct kinds of statements. um, everyone reacts differently. And that process for me, I did not start gaining weight again for 4 years. So it is a process. And I'm not saying my experience is going to be everybody's experience, but that gives you at least one data point that this is not, losing a job is not something that you can just adjust to immediately, that it will take time and you have to be in it for the long haul, but hopefully things will get better. So I guess that would conclude my comments, Terry. I think it would be great if we could open it up for questions of the panelists and hear what other experiences have been like.
I have to say, for the first time in my life, anthropologists are on time. We are exactly on time. So I want to thank all of you, all of our speakers. I would say this has been very enlightening for me. I am really, as has been said, very gratified that all of you put yourself out there on vulnerability terms. I wasn't anticipating that, so it's a very important thing to touch on. And you're right, Elizabeth, that we have time now. What I would like to do is a couple of things. First, and this is for the chat, okay? If folks want to put this in the chat, there's been discussions about, maybe I'll turn my camera on here again. Should we have a survey, some kind of survey that helps encapsulate all these experiences, what people are going through to get a real breadth of that. If you think that is an interesting or good idea, it'd be like a snowball sample. We'd just be reaching out and just getting more and more folks to tell others about it, take the survey. If you think that is useful, please put that in the chat, and particularly what you would want to see in that survey. Open it to questions saying, what's your experience like? What are you doing? Similar to what we've talked about here tonight, but to really gather a real breadth of experience, because this is unique. This is historic. This is not something that has happened before, at least certainly not in my lifetime, and nothing I recall. That's part one for the chat. Part two is, and this goes to a couple of comments that came into the chat. Other discussions that are ongoing are, do we need to have a central repository, archive, clearinghouse for this particular session? But all the discussions and people have sent in some literature and all these sorts of other documentation. Would it be helpful to have a particular, whether it's SFAA, NAPA, AAA, WAPA, would people find value in that? Having one place to go to find out what's happening with everybody else. So I just want to put those couple of things out there. And then that's for the chat. Just put in comments on those two topics if you want to in the chat. I would like to go back to our speakers, and Elizabeth, include you in this as well, since you've been around the country interviewing people. You've talked about careers for years, and certainly most recently after all this upheaval for this calendar year. Some of this was touched on in your presentations, but does anybody have any particular skills or experiences that they found that potential employers, when you're doing interviews, things like that, when you're networking, any particular thing that stood out to you? Did you see people's eyes light up or get back to you? So if we want to go maybe just in order again, starting with George, was there anything like that you found that was particularly of interest when you were putting out feelers?
Yeah, great question. I got these questions way beforehand, so I've been thinking a lot about them. I would say probably give a unsatisfying answer, and say I don't think there are any particular skills that employers are looking for, especially since we're all probably looking in slightly different kinds of different sectors. But more than anything, I would say, well, two things. One, I would say, um, you know, I think it's more a matter of understanding what your own skill set is. Like, we have a really strong skill set. I don't think that we need to learn new skills, right? Like, we have them. And so I think it's like really helpful to reflect on what those are and really be able to kind of concretize them and be able to speak about them and really feel very confident about them. Like I can remember I was also a AAAS fellow, as was Anahid. And I remember, coming out of grad school into that interview process, where I always say that many of us coming out of grad school are like hurt birds, just like recovering from this trauma. And I, with AAAS, you do this like just like rapid succession of interviews, like 11, 12 interviews for jobs. And it's a little bit different because the offices really want you. It's not like just a traditional job interview. And it was like the most affirming thing that I'd ever done in my life. And coming from anthropology, I was talking about my skill sets in terms of like understanding people and being able to talk to people. And time again, the people on the other end were like, oh my God, like, you know how to talk to people? That's amazing. We need that skill. So, I'd say like, don't overthink it. Just really reflect on what your skills are. And I would also say, I'm looking at my notes here, as far as like the job, again, for me, it was really helpful to let go of thinking of my dream job. Part of that also was thinking about like, okay, like I just need the job that's good enough for right now. And also, what are like, we've talked about values. Like I reflected on what are my values, what's important to me, what are my, what are the things that I really prefer, what are the things that are really critically important, and what things do I need to like let go of. And I would say, we're all coming at this from a really different sort of social and probably economic standpoint of like how long we can wait until we get a job or what kinds of things we need to do. We all have really different pressures. And I would say, if you're in a position where you need to take a job that is maybe not one you ever saw yourself in, that's okay too, right? Like you need to do what you need to do right now. And yeah, it's okay. And it'll also be like such a huge opportunity to learn more about yourself and learn more about that sector. And also you may be like, no, hate it, moving on. But just be like, yeah, kind to yourself in this time. So that's sort of my advice. Over.
Thanks. Sarah, anything you wanted to put on that?
Yeah. So I never one thing I very, very strongly believe in is what Georgia said. Understand your skills, your values, and they don't necessarily I was kind of coaching somebody who hasn't been able to find a role yet in historic preservation. I was chatting with her over the summer, and she just kept telling me she doesn't have any skills. She doesn't have any skills. It doesn't matter if you think you don't have any skills. You really have to sit down and write out and make a list of what you can do, because even, I like what Georgia keeps saying about, it doesn't have to be your dream job, because it doesn't. And sometimes you land your dream job and it doesn't work out, right? And so you need to be prepared for that. But every job that you do, whether it's the job that you have been dreaming of or not, you're going to have to do grunt work and administrative tasks and things that you don't necessarily foresee being a skill for that role. You still know how to do things. If you've worked in customer service, if you've worked in food service, if you've worked part-time at a doctor's office, any of those things, you are going to be able to take those skills and transfer them anywhere. Now, I will say I never go into a job interview without having looked at a company's or an organization's mission statement and finding a way beforehand to align my values and skills with their mission and find some way in the interview to articulate that. I'll say something along the lines of, well, I feel like this is very important to me, and I feel like this aligns with your mission statement. And then I will quote their mission statement back to them and talk about why that's important to me and why I think that I can leverage my skills in service of that. And every single time I get a smile or a nod or some body language that I can tell is very affirming. So whenever you have an interview, even if you haven't even made it to the interview, right? If you're just writing a cover letter, make sure you look up an organization's mission statement and find a way to fit that into the process.
Great advice. Thanks. Anahi, did you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation?
Sure, absolutely. I would say like earlier this summer, I interviewed for a software company. It was called Menlo Innovations in Ann Arbor, and they were advertising for they called it a high-level anthropologist. So of course, what I'm going to do is I'm going to express some interest in that. But it just and the emphasis was on teamwork. So like their style of working was that everyone would share a computer, or you would be evaluated by how well you handle a mouse, like if you are good at sharing. And apparently I wasn't very good at sharing. So I think but you have maybe really think critically about like well, the work that was being done there actually is it has anthropological ideas, but it's not really the anthropology we understand it, and it wasn't a good fit for me anyway. So that's something I like to do with networking, as I do consider that a strength. It helps me suss out like yes, I am the one in need. I do need a job pretty soon. That'd be great. But also, you have to think about a longer term fit as well. So it's like it's to me, it's a two-way street. Am I a good fit for you? But also conversely, would I be happy here? And looking at the past bosses I've had, again, from roles that I didn't think I'd be happy at. For example, working for the Marine Corps. I think it was the second time I worked for them. I was a women, peace, and security subject matter expert for the entire Marine Corps University. Each branch had their own women, peace, and security expert. So my job was I was working under this like infantry lieutenant, Marine lieutenant colonel, and I looked at him and thought, oh, there's no way we're going to get along. But then he was one that really was very pro gender integration in the military, and he would really had my back. So I've learned to not judge people, but also in the sectors that I've worked in before, yeah, there are some people that I will not align with well, but it's also forced me to check my own biases. So I think I'm repeating myself, but yeah, thank you.
No, that's excellent advice about biases. We can do that all too easily, unfortunately. Elizabeth, did you have anything else? Like, again, given your broader discussions, are you finding anything when people are making these transitions that might be of interest to potential employers across? I know, again, it's a very broad topic, but anything you find on that?
I think the main thing is that we're finding is network, network, network. You know, just like the old real estate uh, slogan, location, location, location. So I think the more that anthropologists network, the better off they're going to be. Partly because they start to create community through their connections. And in creating community, what I've noticed is that people are willing to be extremely helpful. I've never been turned down by anyone when I've asked, would you be willing to talk to so-and-so, or would you be willing to talk to me about a particular topic? I think that it's sort of part of our DNA as anthropologists that we're wanting to help other people be as successful as they can be, and perhaps with our help, they can, get to the next level. So my advice is always just keep networking. And the more you network, the more likely it is that good things will happen to you. They may not happen on your time frame, but chances are they will happen.
Great, thanks for that. I would highly recommend everybody be part of Elizabeth's network. It is vast.
No, it's not my network. It's the Anthropology Career Readiness Network.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Look into Acorn. Somebody put that in the chat. I think they mentioned, maybe you did that. On that note, just thanks to our speakers again, but thanks also to the audience. You guys have a tremendously robust discussion going on in the chat. I've been trying to toggle back and forth and keep track, but there's a lot of interesting comments going on. So thank you for that. Also for being patient. I know probably a lot of you have some things you want to say. So let me one comment I did see was from Lois about teaching her students. So I see George, you have your hand up. So let me go back to George, and then Lois, if you wanted to come off mute and just if and again, I know some questions might have been answered, but if there's anything you want to bring up, so Georgia and then Lois, please.
Thank you. Sorry. Of course, after I stopped talking, I remembered there were a couple of more concrete things that I also advice that I had that I wanted to make sure to share. And I think, well, first of all, the thing about the value and taking a job that's outside of your values or something, the reason I feel like that's important to share is because I think that we can be very judgmental of each other and ourselves. And I think it's important to feel freedom to like be able to do what you need to do in the moment you need to do it. Um, as far as some more concrete advice, I think, Anahid mentioned ChatGPT. It's incredibly useful. I'm so like against AI. I hate it, whatever. But you know what? Like in this moment, it was so needed. And I found it to be incredibly useful for many things. Of course, helping me beef up my job documents, but also for things like I actually talked to ChatGPT about what what kind of uh, job it thought I should have, right? So I had gone through an exercise with former colleagues of like talking about what my strengths were, and they shared it back to me, and I sort of put that in ChatGPT, and I was like, "Oh, this is what people say I'm good at. Like, what do you think I should do?" And it was incredibly helpful breaking down different kinds of work, and different kinds of questions I needed to ask myself as I thought through it. So thinking outside of the box as well on ChatGPT. And one last thing on ChatGPT that was so helpful for me was I actually used it to prepare for job interviews. You can actually like have it prompt questions for you and record yourself, and it'll give you feedback on your answer, and that's helpful. But I think for me, it was especially just very helpful to just get comfortable talking in the way that you have to answer job interviews. It's really like just a muscle that I had to sort of build up again. And then um, another very targeted bit of advice on job interviews. I think I know myself, sometimes I tend to go into these in a sort of like from a reactive point of view, thinking like, okay, like how am I going to share with them that I'm good for this job? But I found it much stronger of an approach to come at it with like, here's what I'm going to do, here's what I'm going to offer you, something that goes sort of really beyond just what the job description is. That's honest, that's just saying like, hey, like this is who I am, this is what I bring, this is what I'm going to do in this job, and this is where I'll be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. I think that's really helpful, for all of us who've been on the other side of the employer side posting job ads. Sometimes like employers don't know what they want either. And so if you can sort of show them that you are what they want and you have the ideas they want, I think that can be really helpful. And then just, the last bit of advice that I have is really, I've seen so many of my different colleagues approach this from really different points of view. I know a lot of people who are just throwing like as many applications as they can as possible, others who are paralyzed to do anything. And I would really, for me, I've really benefited from having kind of a, let's say, like whole of person approach. And it's been freeing for me. I know Sarah talked about how the job is so tied into our identity. Um, I've really worked to sort of build my identity around other things in this time period, and that's been incredibly freeing. And so thinking about that next step as not just what's the job I want, but like who do I want to be in that next step? What role do I want that job to have in my life? And what other stuff do I want to have time for as well? And taking that into the job search. For me, I had a pretty multi-pronged approach of, applying for, 2 to 3 jobs a week. Also like networking, talking to people, going to, events. The nice thing about DC is that there are lots of like free conferences and talking to people. And so really making sure I was sort of taking care of myself day to day, and over time, and having, just a like, whole person approach. That's my summary of advice. Thanks for letting me speak again, Terry.
That's all good. No, it's all good stuff. I like the thing about getting those muscles. You got to get those muscles exercised, especially if you haven't looked for a job for a while. You've got to get those muscles reactivated. Lois Sanford, are you still with us? You had a question in the chat, which I thought was interesting, but I think she might have left. And before people might start leaving, but let me just say I saw a couple of comments in there about WAPA. If you have had a bad experience with WAPA in the past, please give us another chance. It's a really interesting organization. I would also say WAPA is what you make it. So if you find something you don't like about WAPA, come change it. Come take over. I was I was a member about a year, and then at an SFAA meeting, someone said, "Hey, congratulations on being the president next year." What are you talking about? They had appointed me. So you can be the change you want to see. So Shirley Fisk, are you on the call still? Because again, before people go away, I want Shirley, I'm not sure if Rob Winthrop is here, but I know you're planning some discussions for Albuquerque at the SFA meeting. Is that right? Is there anything you can add to this to let this group know about?
Yeah, I would like to, let's see, Rob Winthrop and I are planning an open discussion section on the public sector crises. And that means, just like this group, everyone who has been affected by forced resignation or deferred resignation, or by DOGE, or by having their contracts pulled out from under them, academics who have lost funding or had to rewrite their statement of work. And it's basically to find out what people are doing and how they're adjusting their life. And somewhat like Terry, like you've organized this to find out about careers. And there are no panelists. It's just I think it's called a roundtable, but it's a discussion so that people can individually share, just like these great speakers did today, where they've come from and where they're headed now, and maybe some of the process as well. I was very impressed with how people talked about their vulnerabilities, the emotions that went through this. I am just horrified every day, and my heart goes out to every one of you who is affected by this regime and what's going on and throughout the federal sector. So I want to encourage you to come. We don't know what day it's going to be, but I'm casting around for people who want to commit to being there and telling their story. And Terry, this is now public, but Terry is going to come. And that's one thing I missed hearing about Terry today was your story as well. But I want to, and I think I've asked Elizabeth and probably Kathleen and Neil, but all of the senior anthropologists that have so much experience with careers and helping people, just to go back to Lois Stanford's question and some of the comments that have been brought up today. Elizabeth, I would just add one thing that I noticed crossed all of the different presentations, and that was the importance of rooting yourself or developing a friendship group or a sense of community about with whom you can talk and share your indignation or your vulnerabilities. I think every one of the three speakers really either created them or was the recipient of the networking that comes from that. And in my own personal life, it's so important to have friends who can talk about this disruption. What was I going to, Lois's question? It was about what do I tell my students who are all interested in social change and social justice? What kind of career can they look forward to? And there was some really good comments. I can't find the question, but yeah, I spent my life in DC 40 years encouraging and promoting federal jobs for anthropologists. We have so much that we can give. I'm just destroyed by the kind of rampant destruction of where all the different niches where we have found employment. I'm glad that to hear from Anahid and also from Sarah that they have one thing they have learned is that they can get along with people that they didn't think they could get along with before, or that we put labels on. I know I'm guilty of that. And back to Lois Stanford's question, I think instead of encouraging people to go into public sector jobs at the federal level, maybe encourage people to work at the state level, and particularly in historic preservation and CRM. I think there are so many opportunities there. And working for nonprofits. There's a small nonprofit here in Santa Fe called Somos Un Pueblo Unido. It's an immigrant rights organization. And one point is that even if they don't have enough money to hire a person like myself or a younger anthropologist, I can still support that organization. They're doing very important work on information control. There were for immigrants and immigrants' rights, as I said. But you can also support them either through donations or volunteering to work with them. But on the big sort of international, the kind of place that Georgia found to work at is a big NGO, and that's also they're not necessarily nonprofits, but those are great non-governmental organizations that I think I would encourage an anthropologist, young person interested in social change to work for one of those, because they are interested in social change on the social side as well as the environmental side. So I guess that's what I would encourage people to encourage Lois and her students to think about.
Great. Thanks, Shirley, for all of that. Hopefully, if people can get to Albuquerque, conversations like this could continue. In the meantime, I think an important point to make is that you're not alone, and just what this meeting. But if you do find yourself struggling, I think just reach out to me, reach out to WAPA, reach out to our panelists.
Or come
just
to the
let us know.
session at SFAA.
And if you can't, that's going to be virtual as well, isn't it? Or is that going to be one of those where they have it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know
I know
yet.
that they've been doing that in the past. I'm not sure if that's going to continue on. So I know I've been yapping a lot. Are there questions, comments from folks? Did you have your hand? Is that your hand going up, Cheryl?
Oh, no. I talked enough. Okay. I was just saying thank you. Thank you to everybody. I'm going to turn off my video now.
Right. Okay. So yeah, it just if people want to come off mute, raise their hand. Just any questions, comments for the group, or just anything. Whoops. And I can't see any hands up on my, but I'm not sure if I'm seeing everybody. So yeah, if nobody has questions, that's fine. Or if I'm missing you, just come off mute, because again, I'm scrolling through. I'm not sure if I'm missing somebody. So feel free to come off chat if you're not. Well, great. Not hearing any comments. I'll assume that all is good. Again, this will be posted. I think we have a YouTube channel this will be posted to. We'll put something on the website that links to it. And we've had a robust discussion, like I said, which is also great. I think that discussion is part of the video that comes out, I think. So both of those will be there. If not, I think we can copy it, paste it somewhere else. And we'll look into one of the questions I had earlier was, is there a need for a central repository or central place to keep track of all of these materials? But I remember Adam. By the way, Adam Coons is here. I should acknowledge. Adam, are you in Japan? Are you our farthest away person, or are you? Adam is a former president of WAPA International Development, got DOGed, and did the right thing and fled to Japan.
Yeah, I'm in Japan, but fortunately the timing worked because it's morning and I can attend with my morning coffee. But yes, I got doged from FEMA in March, but I was ready to retire anyway. So I'm in a different position because it sort of pushed me towards what I was hoping to do but afraid to do, which was retire.
Hmm.
I think that's a case for a lot of us, unfortunately. That's yeah, again, the trauma aspect for folks like us was a little bit less than our younger colleagues, unfortunately. Adam, you also had a question which was legitimate about, I mentioned a survey, to what end? It really is just a thought. So if people think it's a good idea or a bad idea, but the idea, I think, is just to capture what's happening. And obviously we've had a few stories here. Unfortunately, we had only about 35 participants, or about 85 signed up. I'm not sure why so many didn't show up, but this is a small group. So that only 30 of us got to benefit from the conversation. So it would be, in a way, trying to leverage that.
Terry, I have a question because you did mention my question, which is, I like the idea that was in the chat earlier about just like a one-page, like our personal story about this instead of a survey, because somebody would have to design a survey and then collate them. But then the other question I asked is, what would we do with them? I mean, we could collect all the one-pagers and disseminate the request for these beyond the people that are attending right now. We might get a lot of them if it's only one page. But then what do? Do we disseminate? We can perhaps disseminate them somehow through SFAA or NAPA or ACORN. But I think that they would be very, very interesting. It's kind of like the blogs that are on ACORN's site, which is personal experiences as a practitioner. Which and I encourage everybody to look at the Acorn site's blogs. But I think that might work. I would be happy to do a one pager, but instead of like a formulaic survey.
Right. Certainly would be easier to manage. I missed that. I'll go back through and look through the comments. I kind of lost track of the chat, so that's great. I see Joanne. So I'll look through that, and maybe that's something. In terms of the dissemination, I don't think that's going to be the problem. We're definitely going to find some places to put it out there through the various channels. So, Joanne, and by the way, if anyone wants to volunteer to do that, to collate that, let me know.
Volunteering to do anything right now. One major
for.
idea was me, and the second half of that was actually might be useful to do a little bit of analysis like Elizabeth did, and we might, come up with some sort of ideas of options or skills or something that might be useful if anybody wants to take it on, not volunteering. But, that seems to me a useful thing. The other thing I put in the comments was, I'm not sure what this administration is going to do to the fellowship programs, but frankly, they're a wonderful option for folks. And it's not just the AAAS, which I've done, but there are ones at the state level. A number of foundations have fellowship-like things, so that may be something to look at. So I think that's all I wanted to add, but this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Yep, great. Thanks for that. Other comments, questions, anything? Don't be shy. We are not, WAPA is not a shy in group. So feel free. And as we've seen, a lot of people make themselves vulnerable. So feel free. Lori, you have politely raised your hand.
Thank you. Can I get my video? Yeah. Okay. My video did go on, and now you can see that I have it blocked on my second. I thought I just turned on my video. There we go. WAPA, we used to have workshops for job hunters, remember, in the distant past, and we stopped that because people said, oh, there's a lot online, you don't need it, and now there's AI, as Georgia mentioned. But would that be useful? Certainly, we gave a lot of people a lot of support, and I benefited from it when I first came to DC and lost my first job along with everyone else. So I have a kind of bookend of lost my first job along with everyone else who worked at that place, and then lost my last job along with everyone else who worked at that place. So I wonder though, would it be helpful for those? We could do it virtually. We could then get in people from all over the country to have workshops for job hunting skills. And I don't think we used to do resume and CV development. I don't think we need that anymore. There are enough AI that will do that for you. So what do you think?
Lori, this is Elizabeth. Acorn did a series of 6 webinars this past spring for the Applied Anthropology Network in Europe. This network is part of the European Association of Social Anthropologists. And those webinars are available on our website. They're called Career Paths. Sure, I think workshops are always helpful to people because you're always getting newcomers who need help. So, I'd be willing to help with that if people decide to go ahead and move forward. On the topic of what could we do with these kinds of narratives, it seems to me we would need, I think it would be helpful to have a far wider data set of narratives. For example, just doing the 3 tonight, there were clearly patterns that overlapped all 3, but with more in the sample, you're going to get a lot more robust findings, and maybe that would be helpful for job seekers as well as career coaches.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I will say just, Marcel, I see you have your hand up. Thanks. Well, before COVID, we did have in-person sort of resume writing and career discussions. So it was sort of like speed dating. We had small tables and people would go around for 3 different, and that was always very good. If people have ideas about how we can do that virtually, I think now the technology exists. So, but it was always very popular, very well attended, those things. Marcella, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to say as this was great to come listen to, and I did attend almost all of the panels that Acorn did this summer, and they were all really, really well done. So I would also recommend those. But I had posted in the chat just asking for ways to network, and I'm finding with the DC, like I'm from around here, I'm from Maryland, and then I did my first part of my career was in DC before I went and got my PhD, and it's really hard to get. DC is such an interesting place to be in, and everybody seems to have lost their jobs for one reason or another. But trying to network outside of people that people were already working with, like if you don't already have a professional presence here, is a issue that I'm running into and that other people in the region I've talked to are also running into, and the fact that there's not jobs. I've had multiple people tell me like, "Oh, well, you'd be perfect for this, but I don't have any openings and I don't know when there will be any openings, if any at all." But I just like keeping my finger on the pulse of what places I should even be following on LinkedIn or be interested in. And so I, because obviously not everybody's getting hired as an anthropologist, right? We can have multiple different names and still do anthropology. So I just think that if WAPA could facilitate people also in this kind of earlier career, but have a like PhD or a master's degree kind of trajectory in the area, that would be really helpful to try to create these networks if you maybe got cut off from your professional network from before or are trying to build one around here. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thanks for that. As you were speaking, I was trying to mentally process, and I think don't. I kind of got lost there, but so what the outcome would be. But I think just in terms of networking, things that I found very helpful are obviously looking on LinkedIn about who's hiring for what, and then going in terms of building the network is going to the meetings, and then I will go to sessions, and afterwards I will go up to somebody. I'm sure that was how I first met Elizabeth, is just shanghaied her after a presentation and gave her my email or card or got her card and just started a conversation with her. And that's a good way to do it. And certainly a good starting point if you're here in the areas with WAPA. We have social events once or twice a year in person. Certainly come out to those. And like I said, take over. If you want to, if what you just proposed sounds excellent, if you want to lead that effort with WAPA, you are a person. Your hand is raised.
Be
So
careful, you might also be your next president.
That's right.
Terry, what happened, folks? What happened to the mentoring program? I chaired it for a while, but others have done so more recently.
No, that's a good question. It goes to one of the things I didn't necessarily want to say, but now that gives me a lead in is WAPA is aging. We need young people to come in and take over. What has happened is that we had a pretty good mentoring program for many years, and then the people that were running it retired from everything and moved on, and we haven't been able to find someone to take on. It is a lot of work, to coordinate all that and keep things going. We just haven't been able. So that's, I think, what's happened is nothing has happened, unfortunately. Todd,
Well,
are you?
It's a lot of work and not a lot of work at the same time.
It's once you get used to it,
You really need to be a networker to do it, but
yeah.
it's doable.
So if anybody wants to step up, that's great. Todd, are you calling in from Mexico? Todd Pierce, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah,
come
I'm
up.
right here.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm in Mexico. Everybody, it's freezing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm outside. I'm outside of my patio. So, no, you're right. I mean, WAPA's aging out, right? I mean, I started going to WAPA in my very early 20s, and it's a home for me for many years, and it still is. I'm glad to be reconnected over the last year or so. Talking to Mark Egbert, and one of the things that I suggested was to do some outreach. I can certainly help with this remotely, outreach to the universities to maybe offer membership for free to students. I know it's like $5 or $10, something like that, but we can do some kind of outreach. Maybe it's not free membership, something like that, but I think that would be really useful to take advantage of the student population in the area and get them involved, because we need new blood to start coming through. Not just graduate students, but undergrads as well. Thoughts?
Yeah, certainly a good idea. One thing we find, we've done some efforts like that and probably will continue. Students move very quickly. So by the time we get them on board, integrated, doing something where they're being involved, then they graduate and move away, which is unfortunate. But certainly we need to come up with a paradigm. No, absolutely, it's got to be done. We have to find a paradigm that works. If they decide to move away, that we can keep them involved somehow.
Mhm.
keep them plugged into the networks.
Or create their own network,
Right, exactly.
like in their
Yeah.
own local areas, and like WAPA was created for, right, originally. So yeah, and a good percentage might stay in the DC area though, you know?
Yep, yep. And there are certainly lots of folks in DC that never joined WAPA, which is I keep finding people all the time. Oh yeah, been here 10 years. WAPA, what's that? So we, for whatever reason, haven't gotten
Just a thought, yeah, to get it might be something worthwhile. We can talk about it, though. I'd be certainly I've got the time because I don't really have a job right now, so I've got the time to dedicate to some of that.
We just have to get you off the beach. Yeah.
Yeah,
East
I
Mujeres.
rarely
Yeah.
even go there, but yeah.
All right.
Good to see you guys too.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah. If you have any ideas, just ping me because I'm going to start doing a membership push here. I did a first wave and I'll start second wave here right before.
Yeah, we can make a flyer to go out to all the faculty members.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Other comments, questions? I know we've sort of gotten a little bit off track, but bigger picture things. We're at 8:45, so we still have a little bit of time if anybody wants to hang around. Okay, well, thanks again. We're some of our speakers are still here. I see Elizabeth Sarah still there. So thank you all again. I think this is a very valuable discussion. I hope it's not a one-off. We need to keep finding ways to having these sorts of discussions and stick together through all this. I don't know if anything else is happening prior to the March SFAA meeting, but just keep track on the WAPA website, SFAA. And again, if you feel alone, reach out. I'm not sure if I'm Terry M. Redding at Gmail. If anyone wants to email me, I can put you in touch with other folks. I'll write that in the chat. But thanks again for everybody for sticking in there. And this will be up on the website hopefully within the next few weeks if anybody wants to come back and look. But again, to all of our great presenters, thank you. And come join us in our next meeting in January. Yeah. And happy holidays, everybody. Happy New Year. And hopefully it'll be better for all of us. Thanks again.